Hi, William Hououin here for a new Villagers and Heroes poll discussion. So, the latest poll was all about crafting specializations. That's gonna be a hard one because saying specializations is hard for me. Anyway, let's see what we asked. All about crafting specializations. Do you have a crafting specializations? If so, which ones? How long did it take you to acquire your crafting spec? I'll call it spec, alright? Was it too expensive, too cheap, or just right? Rank all 5 crafting spec from most useful to least useful. How often do you use your crafting specializations on a daily basis? Have you ever been asked to create items using your spec? Is there a market for those items? Do you think players should be able to have multiple spec per character? How would you improve each of the crafting spec, and are there any new spec you would like to see added? So first we have Cosmic Kitty saying, do you have a crafting spec? If so, which one? Yes, prep spec on main. I think my alt will be potions. How long did it take you to acquire your crafting spec? Was it too expensive, too cheap, or just right? I think the costs are about right, takes time but is doable. Rank all 5 crafting spec from most useful to least useful. Weapon, potions, armor, prep, the other one no one remembers. How often do you use your crafting spec on a day-to-day basis? I spend a lot of time breaking down pelts for stitching for charter. How have you ever been asked to create items using your spec? Is there a market for those items? Besides low-level stitching for charters, no one really asked me for preps. Most of my crafting is lower than it should be. Do you think players should be able to have multiple spec per character? Multiple, no, but I do think you should be able to switch if you earn the spec item again. How would you improve each of the crafting spec? I don't think they really need much. I wish prep could make things like hand grip for no cost though, and maybe make production useful. Are there any new spec you would like to see added? More would be fun, but I haven't had coffee yet, so I can't think of any. Next we have some all about crafting spec. Do you have a crafting spec? If so, which one? Yes, prep spec, then potion spec, then weapon spec. How long did it take you to acquire your crafting specialization? Was it too expensive, too cheap, or just right? It took a long time. Villaging is boring to me as it's just pressing a button once every 60 seconds for both gathering and crafting. I'd love to be a villager, but it's just so mind-numbing as it currently is. I just hero the heck out of everything and buy stuff from friends, people on the server. Ain't nobody got time to press a button every minute for hours. Rank all 5 crafting spec from most useful to least useful. Potion, weapon armor, prep, huge gap, production. Prod has some uses but significantly fewer, mostly just for getting your character's crafting skill up faster and cheaper, but then what's the point, really, that a character can't have a good spec now, so. How often do you use your crafting spec on a day-to-day basis? Never. How often does one need to make massive batches of mana pots? How often does one decide to take on the horrible task of refining all those pelts you've gotten from your boars and slaying enemies to get another fraction of charter tokens for your next spec? Not often at all. Have you ever been asked to create items using your specialization? Is there a market for those items? Yes, refining leathers into the preps that sell for more charter tokens than the ingredients are worth. I've done it before for a few people, but only like 2 or 3 times. Do you think players should be able to have multiple spec per character? To be honest, no. It would be great, yeah, but ultimately there's no need to have multiple on one character. How would you improve each of the crafting spec? Unsure. Are there any new specializations you would like to see added? Yes, unsure which ones, also out of words. Now we have Matt Fish saying, do you have a crafting specialization? If so, which one? I specialize in crafting enemy death. Seriously though, I do have crafting specializations. My main is an armor spec with 99% of recipes mastered. I have an alt with potion spec. I avoided weapon spec because I don't feel like dealing with, hey Matt, could you make a perfect 4/4 10-20 power level weapon for me, please? How long did it take you to acquire your crafting specialization? Was it too expensive, too cheap, or just right? When I finally decided to focus on it, I think it took a week or so on my own. I feel like the spec should be something you have to work for, and this seemed to do the job pretty well. I just wish we still didn't have that level 1 prep exploit after years of being reported. For your information, that 1 week was without the exploit. Let's not talk about the exploit. Rank all 5 crafting spec from most useful to least useful. I'm going to do you one better. I will rank them on usefulness and appreciation, how much players care about people who have the specialization. Usefulness: weapon and armor, prep, production before 95, potion, production after 95. Appreciation: weapon, potion, a lot of dot, everyone else. How often do you use your crafting spec on a day-to-day basis? Armor: day-to-day? Pretty much never. Once you have the best gear, there is no point in crafting the stuff anymore unless you want to master the recipes. And once you do that, there is no point at all. I will craft some stuff for the guild on occasion because there is always someone leveling up in the game. And once every blue moons, I will get someone ask me for gear. Potion: whenever I run low on certain potions. Most of the time I just craft whatever with my main, since he is the one I use 90% of the time and he already has all the stuff on hand. Imagine Matt being lazy, lol. Have you ever been asked to create items using your spec? Is there a market for those items? I think I just inadvertently answered the first one. As for the second one, not really. People just really don't appreciate good armor. Granted, there is good reason for it. Diminishing returns makes higher gear less desirable than it otherwise would be. You don't need good gear to get through the game. Very true. I am the proof. You can craft good enough gear on your own anyway, and the hassle of finding a spec to help you, it just isn't worth the effort. Dropped gear is considered better, so most people don't look for crafted gear until at least the 80s. Do you think players should be able to have multiple spec per character? Absolutely not. To be honest, I kinda wish we could only have 1 spec per account, but that will never happen. My reasoning is simple. If you can have all spec, then they aren't really spec anymore. Besides, in a game all about player interaction, having multiple spec removes a potential avenue for that interaction, or having alts for that matter. Yeah, it's true, I agree with that. If you have all spec, what's the point of spec then? How would you improve each of the crafting spec? Are there any new spec you would like to see added? I will come back to these two, I need some time to think about it. William Hououin, that should be good enough for now. I will work on an answer to the other two later. And boom, with the magic of editing, we are now later. How would you improve each of the crafting spec? Potion. Currently, if you craft potions using motes of Yorick, you will only get a single duplication, at most, for the entire stack. I would like to change it so that the duplication can trigger on each craft individually. So, say you are making 50 blueberry potions at one time, I want 50 chances to trigger the potion spec instead of just the one. Increased chance to trigger bountiful harvest on potion-related crops, more potions. Production. More stuff salvage from dropped gear, all components salvageable, including stuff like blight motes and swamp items. Chance to duplicate basic items like timber and ingots when crafting. Armor. Allow excluded stats to appear on crafted armor. Misc didn't fit in one spec list. Can use blight motes and a gold cost to replace any rare or below gear with the next tier up. Perhaps the blight modes could be replaced with something else to allow all levels to do this. Add preps for most gear, just not the shield for fairness. Prep specs would make these items at a reduced cost, not free. Option to choose a favored stat when crafting. Favored stats are much more likely to appear on gear and runes. Are there any new spec you would like to see added? Jewelry spec, of course. Can craft rings, amulets, and tradable trinkets. Strength of rings and amulets would be based on gems rather than crafting 30 times of them. Increased drop rate of higher tier gems when gathering. Planting spec. Small chances to create a plentiful node when finishing a latch. Increased drop rate of all items from plentiful nodes, perhaps even a chance for an item only they can get. Option to auto pick up repair globules. Debatable. Chance to create a plentiful node somewhere in the world when exhausting a plentiful node. Salvager spec. Can salvage pretty much anything, including certain quest items. Can craft salvage kits and wands, partly from salvage materials. Option to auto-salvage common and uncommon gear. Honorable mention, housing spec. Not possible because we will have infinity items once we unlock them. I didn't think this one through, but thought it was worth mentioning anyway. William Owen, your content is here. Given enough time, I could probably multiply this list many times over. However, I feel this is more than enough for now. Indeed. And I don't have a lot to say on any of those replies to the poll because I never cared that much for spec. I think I am a potion spec, but I'm not even 100% sure. Now we have Ekimi saying, do you have a crafting spec? If so, which one? Yes, I have weapon, armor, potions, and prep master in that order. How long did it take to acquire your crafting spec? Was it too expensive, too cheap, or just right? I don't know because I didn't keep track. The first one, relatively long, the later ones, not long at all because I tend to save all refines I make when raising craft levels, so at some point I just went to hand in a few vaults and I got the next. I think for new tunes, the price is good. They have something to work towards and can actually feel like they earned something for their work. After you have a few levels on multiple alts, and in my case, one at cap, it becomes quite a breeze to collect enough materials. Partly I think because your view of what is a lot shifts. Sometimes people ask in trade if someone wants to buy the 130 wood they gathered. I chuckle a little if I see that. It is a sweet attempt, but it clearly shows how your view of a lot shifts after you try to cap a tune. Rank all 5 crafting spec from most useful to least useful. Same order as I wrote them in the first answer, although it also depends a little on where you are in the game. If you still have a lot of leveling ahead of you, it is that order. If you are level 95 with max gear and don't care much for alt leveling, it would be potions because you keep using that one to provide your potions for you, given that you don't craft for other people. How often do you use your crafting spec on a day-to-day basis? Now that one of my toon is on rebirth, every other few days to make gear. Potions I don't use that much because I tend to save a lot of stuff and then craft them all at once. Which means I have enough potions at hand for a while to last me. I never use my prep one because our craft levels aren't high enough to be of use to me. Have you ever been asked to create items using your spec? Is there a market for those items? A few times asked, a few times offered. I don't feel there is a lot of market because often the leftover gear I put in auction house comes back unsold. This might have to do with the lack of rarity that is shown in the auction house. It might sell better if it shows its rarity in background color as it does in Vault. People might get more easily triggered to check out the for sale gear if it's purple or orange. Do you think players should be able to have multiple spec? No, I think it's fine as it is. If one character could have it all, there is no point in leveling any alt skills. How would you improve each of the crafting spec? This question requires me to think, and I'm afraid I'm not qualified for that. Are there any new spec you would like to see added? It would be cool if there could be done something with the housing interior coming up. A carpentry mastery maybe that allows you to create extra elaborate or intricate pieces of furniture. Now we have Kaya Kitty Feathers saying, do you have a crafting spec? If so, which one? Yes, weapon and armor so far. Next will be prep or potion. Seems potion is a better option. Just saying. How long did it take you to acquire your crafting spec? Was it too expensive, too cheap, or just right? The first one took me a few years on my own. The second several months with guild help. I think it is just right. The charter that is expensive is the gathering hat. Rank all 5 crafting spec from most useful to least useful. Weapon armor, prep potion, and production at the end. How often do you use your crafting spec on a day-to-day basis? Not daily, but fairly often, especially weapon, since that is the one I have the most 5-starred. Have you ever been asked to create items using your spec? Is there a market for those items? Yes, I have been asked. I have also offered and or gifted. There is a potential market for the items, but like others, I think it would be a better market if you were able to see at a glance in the auction house the rarity of the items and whether it was a crafted item. Do you think players should be able to have multiple spec per character? It depends. I think that weapon and armor and prep and potion are complementary, so could conceivably be dual masteries. So if you are a weapon, you can dual master armor and vice versa. Same with prep and potion, or maybe one of the above 4 with production, but would not recommend allowing just any combination of masteries, nor mastering more than 2. Actually, now that I think about it, Maybe just one of the other four, and production as a second mastery. Statistically, I think production is the least chosen mastery, and it would complement any of the other four. How would you improve each of the crafting spec? With armor and weapons, the ability to select one, maybe two specific stats, or runes, or maybe glyphs. Overall, i.e. with two choices, it could be two stats, two runes, two glyphs, or one stat and one rune or glyph, or one rune and one glyph. With prep and potion, I am not sure. Production, I think, is underutilized, so needs a major overhaul, or used as a second mastery as answered above. Are there any new spec you would like to see added? A component mastery would be nice with reduced cost for creating the crafting components, hobnail, buckles, clasped grips. Now we have Wolf Runner saying, do you have a crafting spec? If so, which one? Nope, not yet. I'll get there eventually, but I tend to find crafting kind of boring. I've been playing for over a year and I have no Tune 295 yet, or a spec yet. How long did it take you to acquire your crafting spec? Again, not there yet. Rank all 5 crafting spec. Weapon, armor, potion, prep, and whatever the last one is. Yeah, nobody cares about production. How often do you use your crafting spec on a day-to-day basis? I don't craft often at all, because gather is kind of boring. Unless there is a good convo in the world, then at least there is something to do. I tend to gather, craft, and read while doing it. Have you ever been asked to create items using your spec? Is there a market for those items? I only do things for myself, but again, no spec yet, so kind of pointless to help others. Do you think players should be able to have multiple spec per character? No, I do not. One is enough. Yeah, I think it's the overall opinion of the very little player base that comments on the poll. How would you improve each of the crafting spec? No clue how to make it better. I wish it went quicker. Are there any new spec you would like to see added? I'd love to see jewelry, man, those words are hard, crafting added instead of relying on drops for that. Plus, give a reason for the gems you find along the way, other than just selling them. Yeah, I agree. That's a good idea. I think jewelry should come as a new spec, and you could use the gems indeed. That's my 2 cents for what it's worth. Now we have DL. Do you have a crafting spec? I don't. I got the spec around 2 years ago, and it's been sitting in my vault since then cause I don't know which one to choose. How long did it take you to acquire your crafting spec? Was it too expensive, too cheap, just right? It didn't take that long, thanks to my guildmates, but it is a bit too expensive in my opinion. Rank all 5 crafting spec from most useful to least useful. Armor, weapon, potion, prep, the other one. How often do you use your crafting spec on a day-to-day basis? When I get one, I think I would use it a lot to make different stuff for all my tunes and others too, but not every day, lol. Have you ever been asked to create items using your spec? Is there a market for those items? Not me, but I see a lot of players asking others to craft for them, so yeah, there is a market for them. Do you think players should be able to have multiple spec? No. How would you improve each of the crafting spec? What Matt said. Are there any new spec you would like to see added? Jewelry, please and thank you. And with that, we are done. It was all about crafting spec. Thank you very much for watching. I don't have much to say on that subject, really. I'm kind of... I was talking more in the housing poll. This one I'm not that much into it. But anyway, thanks for watching and bye bye.